welcome to HaXeZ, where today I want to talk about foundations of information security. So, at the moment, I'm trying to read a book a week, and these no starch press books with the really nice covers caught my eye. I've already read a few of them, and I wanted to do book reviews on each one. The reasons why I want to do them is because it helps me retain the information, because I write little notes on each chapter about how I feel about, not how I feel, but what I think of what the author's saying. But also because if somebody wants to know what this book is like, then it could give them a quick insight and it might be able to help sway their decision on whether to buy it. Tip for those: worth the money if you can pick it up. Relatively nicely priced. I got it for £10 off Amazon, off eBay, I think. £10 yeah, and it's well worth it. The content in it though can be found in a lot of other books. I've read a lot of books regarding like Security Plus, Pen Test Plus, and general information security. So the information in here can be got from other sites, you know, can be got on the internet for free. So it's not revolutionary in the content it holds. It is a book on information security, and as such covers the same content that all these other books will cover. The difference with this book though is that the author, Jason Andress, I believe that's his name, does a really good job of writing that content. So a lot of the books I get bored really quickly with. The actual rules and sort of the information of information security can be a bit droll sometimes when you talk about strategies, defense in depth and things like that. You know, when it's like an informational book, it can become quite tedious to read. But no, this book is really well written. It's fun, it's warm, it's enjoyable. For instance, he uses the quote, "With great power comes great responsibility," and he even goes as far as to quoting it to a specific Spiderman comic book. And he also makes quite a dark joke, where he talks about how modern IoT and modern mobile technologies are becoming an issue in security and securing them. And he discusses how one research group found the vulnerability in the way that a heart rate monitor was connecting back to the sort of headquarters to download updates. And he said, you know, hacking one of those devices could be heartbreaking, which is a bit dark, but I find it quite humorous. But yeah, he covers a lot. So he talks about what is information security, and he does talk about the confidentiality, availability, the CIA model: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And he also mentions a different type of model which I've never heard of before, but it's a different model which adds like 2 more layers, and I've never heard of this before. I can't find it off the top of my head. But then he also talks about defense in depth and how it's like the onion layers of security, where you got the external network, the internal network, the host, the application, and the data. And he does a good job of illustrating it in nice diagrams. I don't know if you can see that, yeah. And he's got a few of these diagrams throughout the book, which really does help you to visualize it. If you're new to cybersecurity or information security, I think this would be a really good book to pick up, because it's really informative, but not complex. He simplifies it quite well, which is, you know, what we tried to do here. Yeah, and he talks about identity and authentication and how sort of old identification methods like passwords, what's the old saying, something you have, something you know, something you are, something along those lines, but how they're becoming outdated. Like, for instance, passwords. You know, the complexity requirements of recommended passwords are increasing all the time, or changing all the time. And for an average user who doesn't use a password manager, it's difficult for them to remember passwords, and oftentimes they'll write them down, stick them to the bottom of their keyboard, or in some cases onto their monitor, and it's bad. And he talks about biometrics, and it's about the crossovers of acceptable failure rates and acceptable false positives. There's like a crossover, false rejection rate and false acceptance rates. I swear I work in cyber. Yeah, false acceptance rates and false rejection rates. Again, it's good. Access controls. One of my favourite chapters, and it will always be my favourite type of chapter in any type of book, is about encryption. He talks through how encryption's evolved over the decades, going back to times where Julius Caesar used the Caesar cipher and the Jefferson disk mechanism that allowed him to crypt documents, and talks about the Enigma machine, again one of my favourite topics to talk about in encryption, but then goes on to talk about modern ciphers and how one of the modern ciphers, PGP it was, which you should be using for your emails and any important documents, how PGP was actually treated like an armament, like a weapon, and the person who invented it was actually under investigation by the US government, whether it's the US government or the FBI, for creating it in the first place, because that's how serious encryption was taken back then. If it was a strong type of encryption, then obviously the government didn't want you using that, because they can easily crack it. Which sort of, what's the point in using encryption at all if it can be cracked? So yeah, it's really good to learn these sort of historical moments where encryption was making a sort of resurgence, it's not a resurgence, was coming up, and how it was seen as like a dangerous technology. And obviously now we've got cryptocurrencies as well, which are sort of seen as a industry disruptive technology, and a lot of that's being sort of frowned upon from a lot of different organizations, and it does make you wonder where it's going to be in 10 years, doesn't it? But yeah, it contains a lot of information, and the information in here, again, you will find in other books, but it's the way the author presents it, which is why I enjoyed it so much. It was an easy read. It talks about the different types of environments now, about how security can sort of be, as infrastructure is moving more into the cloud, the responsibility of the security is moving more to the big organizations, depending on the type of service that you have. So platform as a service, software as a service, and infrastructure as a service, you may know them as PaaS, like IaaS and SaaS. If you're just doing software as a service, then a lot of the responsibility is then shifted to the provider of the software. So Office 365 is like software as a service, or even if you had your own like Lambda functions on Azure, the actual infrastructure that it's hosted on sort of becomes less of your responsibility, and it's up to Microsoft to keep it patched, or AWS, Amazon to keep it patched. And it just shows how the evolution of cyber has evolved from having your own on-site infrastructure, which could lead to like hackers breaking in if you don't keep it up to date, moving over to the sort of cloud where we are today, where more and more stuff is moving to the cloud. I believe the UK government just signed a huge contract with Amazon to host a bunch of secure data, sensitive data in their secure environment. Yeah, so it really sort of is taking you through the history of it as well, and it's always good to learn where we were to where we are today, and it does make me wonder, honestly, where we'll be in sort of 10 years, how much... I believe there's always going to be a need for on-premises solutions, but more and more of IT security is going to move into the... more and more of information technology architecture is going to move into the cloud, but there are certain instances where it can't. So like phone service providers and things like that, I feel like there's always going to be a need for them to have data centers on premises by the massive towers and things like that, and other equipment, and I feel in some cases it just won't be possible to migrate to the cloud, but more and more will migrate to the cloud. And where's that going to leave sort of security consultants? But on the other hand, with the rapid expansion of mobile IoT devices, embedded devices, light bulbs, all these smart devices that are getting connected to the network, and the more that we're going to use that type of technology, as we integrate it into our daily lives, is there going to be like a more sort of personal approach to cybersecurity as well? Are we going to be pen testing individuals? And I don't know. It does get you thinking about where the future of the industry is going. I feel like I'm sort of sidetracking, but that's what all great books do, isn't it? They make you think about your sort of position in the world, I suppose. With cybersecurity, you know, it's not the same. It's not even the same now. We still see web applications every day, because, you know, a lot of organisations rely on web applications, but we're seeing more sort of configuration reviews now as well for like their cloud providers, and probably not less infrastructure, but it's different now to what I'd imagine it would be. Yeah. But my thoughts on the book is that it's really good. I enjoyed it. It was an easy read. I struggle with reading some books like this, like the Security Plus books I've read. I found them very boring and cold, the way the information was delivered. I won't mention, you know, the author of those books, but this one, I thoroughly enjoyed it. The author, you know, he was on the same sort of wavelength, I feel, as me when he was writing it. It's humorous, it's light-hearted, and yeah, you know, if you're new to cyber or new to information security, I'd recommend giving it a go. Give it a read. It's very informative. It will tell you what you need to know if you're looking to get into the industry, and yeah, kind regards.